One of the great misunderstandings, indeed propaganda tactics, of the modern world is conveyed in the notion that the Renaissance, and in particular the Italian Renaissance, was a product of great Christian learning which swept across Europe. This is beyond a misunderstanding or a misconception. This is an out-and-out lie. The reality is that the European Renaissance rejuvenated the brilliance, technology, art, and engineering of the pagan classical world, which the Christian invaders from the Middle East had begun to destroy starting around the year 300 AD, when the iconoclastic movement moved out of what is today Syria and began smashing and destroying pagan artwork, temples, philosophy, engineering, art, and literature. The iconoclasts did this in the belief that within these magnificent sculptures, such as the Elgin marbles, which were atop of the Parthenon in ancient Greece, were possessed of demons. As a result of this nearly 1,000-year reign of destruction, which spread from Syria like a virus all the way into the British Isles and Scandinavia, Christians destroyed, obliterated, and discarded all the previous learning of the pagan world. This is why we have little or no evidence, apart from what was taken from ancient Greece and into the Persian world, of what the sciences, art, and academic world of the pagans was actually like. This gives today's academics and scholars a very, very comfortable ability to sit there, besmirch, and disregard all pre-Christian, and in particular non-classical sources, as if somehow the likes of Plato, Marcus Aurelius, and Socrates were themselves Christians. The reality was they were pagans. And they were thousands of years ahead of what Christianity had produced in later centuries. The purpose of the European Renaissance was for vested interests such as the powerful Medici family of Florence to use their significant financial and banking clout to buy the papacy and install their men on the papal throne. This freed up the artists, scientists, and the creators of the era to begin studying and re-evaluating what took place during the pagan classical era, which had been destroyed and lost when the Christians came to power. And this is the basis of the Renaissance. This exploration and uncovering of lost secrets and destroyed pasts is conveyed very well in Vasari's Lives of the Artists. I quote, "Brunelleschi confided his ambitions neither to Donatello nor to any other living soul, although while he was in Rome he continually investigated all the problems that had been involved in vaulting the Pantheon. He noted and made drawings of all the ancient vaults and was always studying their construction, and if he and Donatello unearthed any remains, such as pieces of capitals, columns, cornices, or the bases of buildings, they would start excavating and have them completely dug out in order to make a detailed examination. This led to their becoming known throughout Rome as the treasure hunters. The treasure they were looking for was not riches, gold, silver, but the means and methods of the ancient engineers and artists who had constructed the classical pagan world. Brunelleschi, the Florentine artist and engineer, used these skills to finally complete the dome which sits atop the Cathedral of Santa Maria de Fiore in Florence, an engineering feat that was considered impossible in its time, and indeed it was. The circumference for the dome was far too wide for any technology of the era to span in the Germanic or Gothic style. Brunelleschi, through his investigation of the Pantheon and how the ceiling was vaulted within Rome, designed the idea of a double dome with interlacing herringbone bricks. The interior dome would act as an internal flying buttress, meaning that the dome could be constructed without the need for complex or gigantic scaffolding. This was a monumental leap in engineering and understanding for the era, so much so great Christian minds of the time could not comprehend or understand Brunelleschi's ideas apart from the Medici family, who were quite capable of understanding what Brunelleschi was attempting, having surrounded themselves with artists as part of their humanism or humanitas idealism, which brought back the Greco-Roman antiquity to transcend and replace the crude, less like life styles of the Middle Ages and the medieval period. The study of the techniques of the classical world did not extend merely just to engineering. The actual visual perspectives of the time were changed in so much that human consciousness was changed by new ways of observation, which in a magical sense, quite literally, changed how Europeans began to learn to re-see their world as their pagan ancestors once did. The discovery of perspective not only allowed more realistic forms of artwork in terms of landscape by understanding of linear distances in relation to vanishing points, but also the complexities of foreshortening, where objects of differing sizes would appear to be the same size when viewed from a certain vantage point, with one much further away than the other. Something we take for granted today, but in the past it was considered almost like a form of magic. If we look at the artwork of the Middle Ages and the medieval period, you can see that there's great difficulty in understanding distances. Perspective is non-existent, and the impression of distance is often conveyed by altering tones, such as making buildings and scenery in the background a blue colour so as to convey some sense of distances. With the arrival of perspective, everything changed. Quoting again from Vasari's The Lives of the Artists, Felipe made careful study of perspective, which because of all the errors of practice was in a deplorable state at the time. He worked for a long while until he discovered for himself a technique by which to render it truthfully and accurately, namely by tracing it with a ground plan and a profile and using intersecting lines. This ingenious discovery made a great contribution to the art of design. It gave him so much satisfaction that when he went to the trouble of drawing the Piazza San Giovanni and showing all the squares in black and white marble, receding beautifully. We can see how this escape from ecclesiastical confinement allowed artists such as Brunelleschi and Albrecht Dürer to bring the magic of perspective into human consciousness once again. Today we take this for granted, but during the Renaissance period, a person beholding a correctly drawn perspective view was nothing less than an act of magic, and indeed it was, because consciousness had been changed. Consciousness had been shifted from a two-dimensional and awkward Christian worldview towards a three-dimensional and restored pagan classical worldview. One shudders to think what Europe may have been like had not the likes of Brunelleschi, Donatello and the Medici family not have allowed a situation and a culture to thrive whereby the secrets of the pagan past and the magic of our pagan ancestors was brought back.
Okay, one last time. These are small, but the ones out there are far away. Small, far away.
If you would like to know more about the ideas of magic and sorcery having practical applications, such as the discovery of perspective and altering human consciousness, you can check out my book Sorcery, The Invocation of Strangeness. You can also subscribe to my channel Open Source Occult TV, the links to all of which are below.